Jacobs missed the last 2 practices. The stream is live. You're not even doing anything.
I'm not.
Doug. It's all Hunter remotely.
It is. I sent out Hunter's off today, and I sent out an SOS to Hunter, who, God bless his soul, answered the call. And
it's not tweeted out yet, though. I'll get excited when it gets tweeted out.
Okay.
But the injuries, the pre-existing injuries, I kind of got off target there for a second.
You're talking about the
Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, Josh Jacobs.
Groin.
Mm-hmm.
Edgerrin Cooper has a hip injury. A couple other guys who are going to be fighting for roster spots. That's the thing. If you're a guy like Don Callis or Keyshawn Banks and you're fighting for a 53-man roster spot, or a fight, as Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst will say, it's a 69-man roster because of the practice squad too. So you got to be healthy for these preseason games. So we'll see who gets back on the field tomorrow. We know 2 guys will likely be elevated in some participation capacity in Zach Tom and Tucker Kraft. We will see who else. But talking about Josh Jacobs, I want to get your thoughts on this, Doug, because I had a story today on A.J. Dillon and kind of where he's at in his career right now, entering his 5th year, signing a deal, a 1-year deal for barely more than the vet minimum. He's coming off an underwhelming season. His production has kind of dipped. And Marshawn Lloyd, who they drafted in the 3rd round to complement Josh Jacobs and Dillon, Adam Stenavich said, we got to get him on the field. He's not going to be like A.J. Dillon and sit as a rookie. So how do you see the running back room shaking out this year, especially with regards to the number 2 option to Josh Jacobs?
Well, I think that's going to be Marshawn Lloyd. I don't really see that going any other way. As long as he's healthy, he's going to be your number 2. But as far as Josh Jacobs, we talked to him in the locker room, I think on Thursday, and he made it seem like the groin injury, just a precaution, still early in camp. There's a little bit of a tweak, nothing to worry about. Again, that's what the player is saying, but he said he wanted to go that day and he wasn't sure if he was going to go on Family Night. So, I guess we'll see what his status is tomorrow. He missed some time earlier in camp as well. So, I mean, you went out and you made the investment on Josh Jacobs, and then you made the 3rd round investment on Marshawn Lloyd. And then, with A.J. Dillon, I think everybody was just surprised that he was back. Everybody likes A.J. Dillon, and he's familiar with the system. He's in incredible shape. I mean, he walks around the locker room without a shirt on. He walks around the field without a shirt on, just showing off exactly how yoked he is. And he is built like a Mack truck. But again, what we've seen over the last couple of years from A.J. Dillon is, when it was he and Aaron Jones, for a time, there was a thought that it was 1 and 1A. And as we talked about ad nauseum last season, it was not. It was a 1 and a 2. And now with A.J. Dillon, I made this statement, I think about a month ago or so, or maybe I was on with Billy during one of his shows. I hope that he's enjoying his time with the Green Bay Packers right now as a player, because when his playing career is over, and he's already going into his 5th season, and players, the average, career in the NFL is a little over 4 years. So he's already gone beyond an average NFL career. I hope he's enjoying this, because I think that he loves this area so much. His wife is from here. He maybe took less money to come back to Green Bay, but I don't know what the market was for A.J. Dillon, though, either.
Yeah. When I talked to him in the locker room last week, he basically said he had a handful of offers from other teams that were in the ballpark. And the way I interpreted his comments to me were he had offers for more money from other teams, because then he also brought up, but at the end of the day, it kind of evened out because you had to factor in the cost of moving your family, still paying for your house in Wisconsin, because obviously he married local into the Toonin family, and then paying rent wherever else he goes. And he wanted to be back. The Packers wanted him back. He's a guy who knows the offense. Marshawn Lloyd spoke recently about how valuable A.J. Dillon has been for him and Josh Jacobs. And, A.J. said to me, whether it's 2 yards or 2,000 yards, he wants to have no regrets. And he plans to, this was in response to the question I asked him about, how do you kind of view the situation that you're in right now? Because AJ's been there before. He was drafted in the 2nd round. Jamal Williams knew he was kind of a lame duck. This year, AJ knows he's a lame duck. He's no fool. Marshawn Lloyd was drafted in the 3rd round. I said, so how do you kind of view the situation you're in? You didn't sign for much money. He knows that. He said, I don't really view it in any sort of way. My job is to be here and We got 2 rookies in the room, coach up the younger guys, do whatever I can to help the team. And he's always had the right attitude about it. His production just hasn't matched it. And what I wrote in my story today is perhaps it's unfair that, he was a second-round pick and carried those expectations. And his head coach advertised him as Aaron Jones' equal. Aaron Jones, one of the most dynamic running backs of this generation of running backs.
Mm-hmm.
Really. I still think he's underrated. And with those comparisons came the expectation that A.J. Dillon could be a feature back when given the opportunity. And he's a serviceable number 2, like I've said a million times on this show. Since he entered the league, he's 28th in the league in yards after contact per rush. That's not good for a guy of his stature. His yards per carry have dipped in each of the last 3 seasons. Since that 21 carry, 124 yard, 2 touchdown game in the snow against the Titans in 2020, his single game high is 93 rushing yards.
Yeah.
So,
and he's had opportunities too.
He has. And with Marshawn Lloyd, there's just this different burst, a different cut, a different shiftiness, breakaway speed about him when you watch him.
Yeah, he came from that high-octane offense of Lincoln Riley's, too.
Sure. And even if it's been a handful of times we've seen it, since he has missed some time with the hip injury in camp, we saw it even going back to the offseason program. He just looks different, plays different. That's not to say there isn't a place for A.J. Dillon on this team. I still think there is. But Marshawn Lloyd's going to get on the field.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think with A.J. Dillon, he's just trying, like you said, he's just trying to find different ways to help the team win. And when I say I hope he enjoys, his time as a Green Bay Packers player, I think eventually if he wanted to be a coach, if that's something that he wanted to do, I think he could explore that. If he wanted to be a broadcaster and stay in the game that way, I think that could be an avenue for him to explore. But his days as a player in Green Bay, not breaking any news here, I think they're numbered.
Yeah, this has to be. It doesn't have to be, but you'd think it's his last year.
Said that last year, too.
Yeah, we did. But like he said, he wants to leave with no regrets if this is indeed it. And who knows? Maybe he has a great year, gets himself some more money elsewhere. He's not only fighting for his job in Green Bay, he's fighting for his job in the NFL. Because he said it to me the other day. 5 years in the NFL for a running back is a good accomplishment.
It is.
He wants to extend that career. So you're not only, and this is every year for every guy, you're not only fighting for your job with your current team, but also 31 other teams because everyone has tape of you. So that's where the running back room is at right now.
But I also think it's valuable. I mean, you mentioned it because he does know the offense. And you've got 2 guys that are first-year players here. One, obviously, Josh Jacobs, a veteran in the NFL, but another is a rookie in Marshawn Lloyd. So it's valuable to have someone who at least has the breadth of experience of knowing, how the offense works.
Sure.
As the season goes along, and especially at this point of training camp.
Yeah, and like I said, that's what Marshawn Lloyd said. It's really important. I wonder this. Is there a chance A.J. Dillon doesn't make the initial 53?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a possibility. I think it depends on how specifically Lloyd, gets through training camp and, shows through some of the preseason opportunities that he's going to have. I think that's a big factor in it. If it looks like he and Jacobs isn't going to get any carries during the preseason, probably. But if Lloyd grasps the offense and performs, it might be time to say goodbye to A.J. Dillon. And I do think right now in camp, he's doing everything to show that he belongs on the initial 53.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if it's going to be enough.
It may not, because not only do the Packers have Josh Jacobs and Marshawn Lloyd, who are, I think, the 2 roster locks at that position, Emmanuel Wilson showed some flashes. He was a preseason darling last year.
Yes, he was. He was my preseason darling last year.
Had that 81-yard touchdown run against the Bengals. And then, hurdled a guy against the 49ers. Didn't do all that much in between. But if they see some promise with him, they're not going to keep more than 3 running backs on the 53.
No. Not in this offense.
No. And A.J. Dillon could be the odd man out. So, listen, I enjoy A.J.'s company. He's one of the guys I've gotten to know best in that locker room, but it's a business. And he knows that. He gets it. He knows, he signed for barely more than the veteran minimum. So we'll see what happens there at the running back position. On the other side of this break, Do we need to talk about the wide receivers? Nah, they're kind of the same. But I want to talk about Jeff Hafley's defense, what they're showing early in camp, because that might be the X factor for this team. I know that's not like a grand statement saying the defense is the X factor, but we kind of know what we're going to get from the offense. We got to see Jeff Hafley's defense in action. We've gotten glimpses of it in practice, but we can only glean so much from that. We're going to dive into Hafley and his first impressions after the break here on the debut season 2 of the Matt Schneidman Show here on The Game. Demi Lovato play for a little bit. I can play like a bat. Oh, nope. Got the lyrics wrong. All right. Done. I got the lyrics wrong. I was going to go for as long as I could.
Oh, all right.
I was in the basketball lyric. Jeff Hafley.
Yeah.
It's a good transition right there. You can tell I've been doing this for a while.
You're a professional.
Something that stood out to me the other day, and listen, everyone has said, oh, I love Jeff Hafley. Players like him. Eric Stokes, Rashawn Gary, other people. But you got to, as a reporter, sort through what's cliche, what's just fluff, and what is substance. And there's been one quote specifically that I've taken more so than any other one as, okay, this might be a guy that players really buy into. So who's the guy that appeared from the outside to have the biggest problem with Joe Barry?
Jair?
Correct. And I'm going to read you a quote from Jair Alexander, the one time he's talked to us in camp, about his new defensive coordinator. He said, the first day he came in, I was in his office. I talked to all the coaches. He was very open to suggestions, ideas from me, which a lot of coaches don't want to hear sometimes. And I just knew from that point, we're going to have something. That's the first part of the quote. I want to pause there. He is not directly calling out Joe Barry, but do you remember the season opener against the Vikings a couple of years ago when Jair told me and Rob Domofsky after the game that he wanted to shadow Justin Jefferson and suggested that, and Joe Barry said no?
I remember that.
And now here Jair is talking about coaches who value player input. You can do the math there.
Right.
Second part of the quote. I love Haf. We had a good conversation yesterday. Haf's super smart. He's super smart. He's a DB's coach. You would love to play for a guy like Haf because he's going to break it down and he's going to cater to what we're covering. Besides football, even me and Haf have very interpersonal conversations, and I can respect that about him. It's more than just a coach. He's a man. I'm a man, and we can have those conversations. So if there's anybody who's going to tell it and listen, Jair Alexander was asked about Joe Barry last year and gave the cliche, I don't even think he praised Joe Barry. I remember I asked him late in the season, and I forget what he said, but he certainly didn't say that.
Yeah.
So while some guys may just give the cliche boilerplate, oh, he's a great answer to anything, Jair Alexander will not. He'll tell you how he's feeling. And I think that's genuine when he says those words about Jeff Hafley. But then again, you can be a player's coach and have the support of your players and have them all like you. You got to have the results on the field. We've heard good things about kind of how the defensive line is playing. Specifically, why having their hand in the dirt will help them. How having guys like Kenny Clark and Devontae Wyatt and TJ Slayton and Carl Brooks rush strictly from the interior instead of kind of on the edge of a 3-4 defense per se will help them. Kenny Clark won't have to be going up against maybe quicker offensive linemen. Brute strength is what he can use along with his agility. He can do it all. He's a 3-time Pro Bowler on the inside. What are the linebackers going to look like? Right now, Eric Wilson is getting reps ahead of Edgerrin Cooper. We thought Cooper was going to be the breakout rookie. Or the DB is going to show out because Hafley's a DB coach. Who's even going to start? Eric Stokes or Carrington Valentine? Valentine's another one who's been out with a hamstring injury the last couple of practices. So Stokes, you would figure, has the leg up right now. Who's going to start at safety? There are a lot of question marks with this defense. There are a couple on the offensive line, but on the offensive side of the ball, there are far more certainties. That's why I said the defense is the X factor. There are so many more question marks on that side of the ball, not only because of personnel, but also because of who their coordinator is.
Well, and with Jeff Hafley, it's not just Ja who's talking about how much they love the new scheme. We talked with Lucas Van Ness a week or two ago. We talked with Rashawn Gary a number of times during camp. They all say the same thing. It's more of my style. You talked about hand in the dirt and getting that leverage for some of the edge guys. And, to a man, they're all saying that they just prefer, a more aggressive. Now, I don't know how much of that is, because we ask them about it and they have to say nice things about your coach until, the coach pisses you off or something like that. But they all seem to really be on board with the changes to a more aggressive style that Jeff Hafley brings, as opposed to what we saw the last several years from Joe Barry.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily think, at least on the surface, that players didn't like Barry. from everything I've heard, Barry was one of the best guys in that building. But maybe his scheme, his defensive philosophies just didn't fit what this team has to offer.
Yeah, maybe.
Listen, like you just said, Doug, we've heard from so many guys. Van Ness, Gary, putting your hand down is going to help. Preston Smith has made jokes about, I'm finally not dropping into coverage. Bill Huber, who we're probably going to have on, he does a great job covering the team. He was on this show a lot last year, has crunched the numbers about the edge guys didn't really drop into coverage. Like Preston Smith isn't actually dropping into coverage. It's just a couple times. So they can make that joke, but I think what these guys are talking about is getting their hand in the dirt, starting from, a track stance as opposed to kind of standing up, will help their get off, will help their explosion. And Jason Rebrovich, the D-line coach who was coaching the edge rushers last year, said, we're all about TFLs and sacks. Well, isn't every defense going to want to be about TFLs and sacks? Yeah, sure. But maybe they're better equipped to be about that stuff. And they're not going to have anyone really, I don't think, on that defensive line who hasn't played significant snaps before. Kingsley Enagbare, who's kind of dealing with a hamstring injury right now. Wonder if that's connected to his knee. Probably is. But I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. Kingsley Enagbare, Lucas Van Ness, Rashawn Gary, Preston Smith, Kenny Clark, Wyatt, Slayton, Brooks, Wooden, all those guys were here last year, and some of them the year before that, some of them going way back to 2016 and Kenny Clark. So that's probably the group I'm most fascinated to watch, because everything's all fine and dandy now. You can say, we feel great rushing the passer, and they were actually pretty good against the run last year in terms of advanced metrics, at least compared to the couple years before that. But guess what? You got Saquon Barkley week 1. He could very well run for 150, and then all that goes out the window. So, like I said, it's all butterflies and rainbows in camp, but can you do what you're preaching, what you're pumping when the pads go on in Brazil on September 6th?
Yeah, and I know that they will talk about, and defensive coaches will talk about quarterback pressures. You got to pressure the quarterback.
Mike Smith used to love that.
Yeah, pressure the quarterback. Well, at some point, you got to get home. At some point, you got to put the quarterback on the ground, because that's how you create third and not manageable. And that's how you get the ball back to your offense. And that's one of the things that I think that Packers fans are really frustrated with. And some of the players are really frustrated with as well. I mean, they've got guys like Rashawn Gary. They've got guys, I think that Lucas Van Ness, to me, and I know we'll probably do this later on, right before maybe the regular season opener, we made the list last year. Who's going to make the biggest leap? I think for me, maybe it is Lucas Van Ness from year 1 to year 2. But for, an edge rusher type, you want to not pressure the quarterback. You want to sack the quarterback, because that's how you eat. That's how you get your money. That's how you get paid. And that's how you get the offense the ball back. And so that's what I'm looking for this year is, yes, pressuring the quarterback is great. You've got the talent to do that, I think, with a number of the guys and other guys, Preston Smith, Lucas Van Ness, Rashawn Gary, obviously. Kenny Clark can get back there at times as well. But you want to see them finish. That's it. You want to see them finish. And we haven't seen a whole lot of that in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and listen, with regards to Rashawn Gary, I'm glad you brought that up, because we've heard coaches over the years preach pressures. And like I said, Mike Smith, the former outside linebackers coach here, loved doing that more than anybody.
Sure.
I understand, and I've written this and said this before, I understand there are more ways to impact a game than just sacking the quarterback and taking the ball from him. Rashawn Gary, I think, had half a sack in the final 8 games of the season since his, breakout game, and not breakout game. I shouldn't say breakout game. Since that amazing game he had in Detroit on Thanksgiving, he had half a sack the rest of the season.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I understand defenses are giving more attention to him. I understand he's opening opportunities for other people. I understand there are other ways he can affect a game than just sacking the quarterback. But like you said, Rashawn Gary is paid like one of the best edge rushers in football right now, one of the best pass rushers. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, all those guys are stacking up the numbers.
Mm-hmm. And they get attention too.
And if they're not, then I apologize, but you get my point.
Yeah.
The elite guys are doing that. You gotta earn your money. And second half of last season, Rashawn Gary did not. He's off to a great start to camp, but guess what? You ain't going to be facing Andre Dillard and Kadeem Telfort from the regular season.
TJ Watt flirts with 20 sacks every year.
You're going to be facing Lane Johnson week 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the best right tackles of this generation.
Yep.
Got to perform. Sure, you don't have to have a sack every game, but you got to make those game-breaking plays. That's what you're paid to do now.
Well, and he feels, and again, camp speak is camp speak. I think he feels like this scheme will maybe put him in a better position to get those types of numbers. Because, yeah, I mean, when you bring up the guys that, the Micah Parsons, the TJ Watts, for example, the recently retired Aaron Donalds, I mean, they attracted attention too, and they still got their numbers.
Of course.
So part of that be scheme? Maybe. We'll see. I guess we're going to find out.
What intrigues you most about the offensive side of the ball? Since we just talked a bunch of defense, I think what intrigues me most about the offensive side of the ball is the wide receiver position. Now, there's no question about the top 5 wide receivers who are going to make the team. Reed, Wicks, Watson, in no particular order, Dobbs, and Melton. That 6th wide receiver spot, coming into camp, like I said, Malik Heath got a spot. Grant Dubose has been playing well. But we're not going to talk about the 6th wide receiver spot. There's going to be plenty of time to debate roster battles. But the fact that one guy can kind of be wide receiver 1 at any point is kind of special. And you don't necessarily need to have a Devontae Adams type or a Justin Jefferson type. Sure, that's great. Any offense would love to have those kind of guys. But we've seen times during camp where Wicks has been the best guy that day. Dobbs has been the best guy that day. Watson's been the best guy that day. It makes it so much harder for defenses to kind of guess where the ball is going if you have 4 gotta-have-it guys, 4 guys that can break open a game, as opposed to just 1.
Well, everybody got theirs at one point last year, right? Everybody had their breakout game. And, when you've got one player who leads the team in receptions and another player who leads the team in yards, I mean, that just shows that you've got guys that can offer some depth. And that doesn't even count Christian Watson, who, again, I'm looking forward to seeing him healthy for an entire year because he offers a skill set.
Knock on wood, find a wooden surface.
Right. Yeah. I think it's just for Micah in here. He's got to stay healthy. He's got to stay on the field, but he offers speed and he can high point balls that the other guys just can't. Jaden Reed had an amazing rookie season last year. Romeo Dobbs is separating himself maybe just a little bit, at least as far as the chemistry that he seems to have with the quarterback because they spend so much time together. But, Bo Melton had, a game last year. Dontavian Wicks. I mean, all of these guys are so capable of doing something special. But for me, it's just going to be a matter of, for me, Watson has to stay healthy, and I think everybody's going to get theirs. And that's a great thing. And I would like to see, because Kraft has been out, but we haven't seen a whole lot of Luke Musgrave this year so far in camp. So I'd be interested to see what exactly, the plan for the tight ends is going to be. I know Matt LaFleur was asked about that after family night. So you just got to keep number 10 upright. I know there's been some injuries on the offensive line. So for me, it's just maybe a little bit in flux. The offense hasn't looked great so far in camp, but again, it's just camp and they haven't been out there against anybody else, period, but against anybody else's number 1s, and they won't for several weeks.
They won't. I forget. We have to get out of here by 5.
Yeah, you got a minute and 10 seconds.
Okay. I'm new to this radio thing. I haven't done radio in a while. Tomorrow, what I want to talk about is Rasheed Walker, Jordan Morgan, that dynamic, because that is interesting to me. Jordan Morgan began the offseason saying he wanted to prove he could play left tackle. Well, guess what? Nobody else has taken first-team left tackle snaps beside Rasheed Walker. I want to talk about kind of how he's held on to the job, what the plan is for the rookie first-round pick Morgan, because on the offensive line, the Packers have been so good there for so long. That's probably the biggest question mark on that side of the ball. How much is Josh Jacobs going to factor into the running game? What's going to happen at practice tomorrow that we're going to talk about? There's probably going to be some unforeseen things that we're going to break down, but I'm glad to be back on the airwaves, especially with Doug. We'll have the live stream up on Twitter tomorrow because we're going to pay for Twitter Premium and expense it.
I think that's how that's going to work.
Thanks, Jeff and Tim. Anyway, we appreciate everyone tuning back. We appreciate everyone tuning back in. Love being back on the air. We'll be back tomorrow episode 2, season 2, Matt Schneidman Show, right here on The Game.
Yeah, in my head, oh yeah.